A very good afternoon to all of you. And as and when the panelists were introduced, I could see a smile on everybody's face, and no guesses who has taken the cake already. And I'm sure such a unique panel that it is. We have these two lovely people who have been through it, who experienced it, who are the practitioners in real sense, who is going to be, telling us more. We are going to be having this panel, and this is going to be on restorative justice. Just to set the context, restorative justice in the most simplest terms only means how we are going to resolve the conflict. And resolving the conflicts has so many ways, but one of the most unique and the beautiful way about restorative justice, as the name itself says, is that it has that element of restoration. It tends to restore the relationships. It tends not to make it into a very confrontational way, and it just kind of sees that it is done in the most amicable way possible. And to have the restorative justice in the educational setting, I think it is one of the most innovative things that we are seeing happening today. So without much ado, we are going to start with this panel because I'm sure all of them are just waiting to hear what you have to say. Okay, so here I have with me immediately Lakshman. Lakshan? Okay. Lakshan, which class are you in? Okay.
I'm in grade 7A.
Okay, so Lakshan is in grade 7A. Now, when did you even come to this experience of restorative justice? And when did you understand, something different is happening? What was your experience of it?
So basically, I've been a part of Sandeepani for 8 years now, and we've always had circles. So since the time I joined, we've had a lot of circles. But after the pandemic, we were introduced to restorative circles, and they were quite new to us actually. So when I came in and I saw the different things, I asked my class teacher, and she explained it. And then most people were quite skeptical, but according to me, I felt as if it was a new change. So I tried to adapt, and now it's become a routine.
How beautiful. Now, you just said it was something different, right? So, what was different about it?
So basically, in normal circles, we used to have generalized topics. So topics about the world, just normal topics. But now in restorative circles, we take up deeper topics with relevance to us. So for example, if there's a conflict going on in the grade, then that becomes the topic for the restorative circles in that week. So we tried to figure out a way to solve that conflict.
How beautiful. And you were introduced to it at what point of time? Which class were you in when you got introduced to it?
I was in 6th, if I'm right.
Okay. So from 6th class onwards, you have been attending the restorative circles.
Yes, so 2 years.
Okay. I will come back to you in just about 5 minutes.
Okay.
Can I have a very quick introduction about yourself? Tell me about your class and what you do and how you got introduced to this restorative circles.
So I'm from 7th grade from Sandeepani, as you know. Yeah, as he said, we've been practicing restorative circles for about 2 years now. And when we came into the class, as he said, for me too, I've been attending circles for as long as I can remember, from small family meetings to bigger school discussions. It has always been in a form of circle in our school. So recently, that is last year, we saw this beautifully centered circle with values and then the 5 elements of nature. So when you see it, you can find the peace of mind. So we sat down and then we started discussing, and our teacher introduced us to this new topic. As he said, in the beginning we were a bit skeptical and did not really trust the process. But as time passed, we learned to evolve and understood the importance it had on us, it had for us. So it became a point of communication for all of us.
And how beautiful. I don't know if all of you in the audience also, kind of observed what I did. And I hope all of you are here with me on this. There are two things that you're such an elevated thinking for a child of your age. I mean, I think it just goes to show what the circles have done. There are two things that she mentioned. One was the 5 elements of nature, and the other one was peace. And I think in the United Nations and in all the big organizations, this is exactly what they talk about. Now, what did you understand by the 5 elements of nature?
Each element represented something. Now, when you take the plant, for example, it brought life to the circle, and the water, that is a piece of peace, and then the never-ending life and our school. And when you talk about the fire or the light, that always represents the brightness and strength. Yeah.
So, how did you integrate this in your restorative circles? What did you do with these?
Every day we started our circles with one simple question: how we felt and how that was related to things around us, or we can say nature, the 5 elements. We had to connect our feelings, the way we felt, from scared or calm or maybe even lazy, to these elements.
So, how many times did you feel lazy?
Yeah, okay. I'm not sure. Quite a lot.
Okay. Lakshan, we will come back to you. You said it was a little skeptical in the beginning. Why? What was that, that little doubt that you were having?
Now, most of the skepticism came from the questions themselves. As when we dove into the restorative circle, we were kind of rushed into the process. So the first question itself was, how are you feeling? That was totally fine. But when we got to the main questions themselves, they were a bit personal. So according to me, that was what brought up most of the skepticism, because most of the students usually don't like to talk about personal things at school. They like to keep that at home. So I would say that's where most of the skepticism came from.
Very beautiful. I'll come back to both of you in a little while I go to the teacher now. Miss Ria has been doing the restorative practice, and she's a practitioner who's actually made this possible. In the beginning of the panel, in fact, when we had the discussion, we were thinking, at least, I was thinking as a moderator, should we have Ria to speak about it? But then I couldn't resist the temptation to go back to the practitioner, and therefore both of you. And it is almost like we have a case study now, and now we're going to come to the framework of how all these things came about. Ria, it's over to you to just tell about your experience and how you conceptualized this. I mean, what was the origin of it? How did it even begin as an idea?
A very good afternoon to all, one and all here. So, as my children here said, we at Sandeepani, we have always been inclined to having circles, and we have always been doing open-end discussions to understand how things are going on. In a school setup, there are children from different backgrounds. We don't really know in what is the frame of mind when a child comes to school. Maybe the child is a little groggy. We don't really know what is the reason behind that. So it's the first few, I would say about 40-45 minutes of each day used to be a circle when we used to meet as a whole group, and we used to have a discussion about how was the day and how are you feeling and all that. So that was pre-pandemic. After pandemic, we had been trained by Enfold. We underwent rigorous training, and we were inducted to the idea of restorative circles. I would say that the circle is a means to ensure that there is a balance of power. Of course, when we are in a circle, there is no power dynamics involved. Everybody is same and everybody is equal in a circle. But there are so many things that come up when we are working with teenagers. There are mood swings, there are peer pressure, there is anger issues. So I feel that circle has given us a genuine way to deal with that, to solve conflicts through open-ended discussion and dialogues. And this ensures that whoever are the stakeholders, they can understand what the impact of their actions have and how that can completely destroy or completely build the other person involved. So, yeah, that was the basic idea of the circle, and there's still a long, long way to go, and we are working with that.
Yeah, and I think, the very fact that it is called as a circle, does it symbolize something? I mean, were you very conscious about saying that this has to be? You rightly said that you had so many other circles in the school, and like both of them were also speaking about their experience. But restorative justice as a circle, do you think it also symbolized something?
Um, well, I would say when we were introduced to the idea, the first thing I remember Dr. Sangeeta came and said, okay, let's sit in a way so that we can promote maximum eye contact. So if we are willing to openly sit in a way where we are open to listening to each other, if we don't look at each other, we don't know what's going on. So I would say that's the first thing that comes to my mind when I'm talking about a circle.
Absolutely. And I think somewhere, don't all of you agree, when we are looking at resolution of conflicts, at least coming from a legal background, we have now moved away from the litigation into alternative dispute resolution, which means we also do mediation and we do negotiation. And like Ria rightly said, I think the first thing is that is so important, that is so critical for any resolution of dispute is that you have eye contact. You just look at another person in the eye. So I think there are a lot of things that it also sets. And was listening also a very important feature that you promoted through the circles?
Of course. So we have a talking piece in all the circles. So this is a beautifully laid circle here. So we have similar circles in our classrooms, and it's adorned with the values and the elements of nature like they mentioned. Of course, there is a talking piece, and when it comes to a classroom setup, the talking piece could be a very trivial day-to-day ordinary thing, maybe just a pen or maybe a keychain, but that particular thing could be of utmost importance to the person who owns it. So that talking piece ensures two things. First is the fact that whoever it's circulated, right? So everybody takes a turn to speak. So as and when it is circulated, everybody is encouraged to ensure that this is supposed to be treated with respect. So it teaches us to value each other's properties. And the second thing is it allows us to listen to others. So in today's world, there are so many people who love to talk. There are very few people who actually love to listen or listen to otherwise. There are so many unknown non-vocal signs that are actually there. If we don't make a point to pause and make an eye contact and genuinely make an effort to listen, that just fades away. So that's the entire point of having a talking piece, to be patient and just wait for your turn. Wait, let that come back to you, and then you speak.
Yeah. So we are playing a video now. Okay. So I think we'll just take a look at the screen because there's going to be a video that's going to be played on, and then we'll come back to the panel.
Wonderful to be here among fellow educators who believe, as we do at Sandeepani, that schools are places where humanity is nurtured. To talk about Sandeepani, we are a progressive K-12 school affiliated to CBSE, situated in Bangalore. And the very first thing that greets you when you walk into our school is a large wall bearing the words, "Here the mind is without fear." It's a slight, deliberate modification of a line from Rabindranath Tagore's timeless poem, where the mind is without fear. For us at Sandeepani, it is more than just a quote. It's a reminder of who we are and the culture we strive to build. Since our inception, we have been using preventive and reflective practices to address behavior. Morning circles have always been part of our daily routine. But when the pandemic forced us online, those circles kind of lost their rhythm. When we returned to campus, we knew that we had to rebuild not just routines, but our relationships. We needed to revive the culture of care that defines us. It is at this juncture, Enfold, who've been our long standing partners in personal safety, who first introduced us to the concept of restorative circles. The approach deeply resonated with our value systems. So, with their support, we developed a structured plan to bring restorative practices into our classrooms. Our teachers were trained in the philosophy and facilitation of circles. This helped in building a shared language and framework to strengthen classroom communities and respond to challenging behavior with empathy and reflection. They've now become an intentional and visible part of our daily routine, as you've just heard from the students from Sandeepani who shared their stories. And Enfold continues to mentor our teachers through regular observations, helping us deepen and sustain the practice. We use restorative circles not only to resolve conflicts, we use them to check in with each other, share important information, brainstorm ideas, reflect on learning, goal setting, and so on. I can see a gradual shift where these circles are strengthening the relationships on campus, improving equity in our discipline, and transforming mistakes into learning opportunities. I would like to say to every educator here today, in a world where youngsters are navigating academic pressure, peer pressure, mental health challenges, social inequalities, and constant change, just imagine the possibilities when listening and belonging become daily habits in all our institutions. As Dr. Sangeeta rightly said at the beginning, I too think that every school, home, and community should practice restorative circles. On that note, I would like to invite my team to share how this philosophy translates into everyday practice in our school community. And over to you, Ria ma'am.
So thank you so much. That was your principal speaking, isn't it? And yeah, she's the director who just spoke and who was just giving a bit of the context of how things work for them in the school. And this is not a once in a time. This is a norm that you have built. So this is the culture of the school and you have made it as the practice. Is there a little that you want to elaborate on that or to add on to that before I go on to the next question?
I think both of them actually spoke. I think that's the best thing that we could actually hope for because they are the ones who are practicing it. So it is right now, the normal circles are the ones that we have on a daily basis from nursery to grade 5. Grade 6 onwards, middle and high school, we do it twice a week. That's the proper restorative circles.
Okay. I just have this one question. This is more of a curiosity question that is coming from myself. When you do the circles, what is the time that you give for these circles? And do you have a particular time of the day that is allotted consistently for this? And how do you also incorporate your other activities of the school when you do these circles?
Well, it's a very good question. Actually, if you look at a timetable, it's properly mentioned. The first 40 to 45 minutes is specially stipulated for the circles. And usually we go on with these circles on Mondays and Tuesdays because the children come back from the weekend break. So they are fresh. So usually it's a morning hour. Like I already said, it's twice a week. So in case if the topic is a heavy topic, we would actually split it and do it on both the days, depending on what the topic is. Either we do it once and finish it on that day, or we do it over the span of 2 days.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ria. I just have another question for you. Do you think pre-COVID and post-COVID there has been a difference in the way that you conduct the circles and the way that your conversations have been going on in the circles?
Actually, I think I already answered that. Pre-COVID, we were not exclusively doing restorative circles. It is now with Enfold and the kind of training that they had given us, the whole process is much more streamlined now. And how we do it is we actually observe our children, and it's the questions or the stems or the theme is basically decided based on the age group that we teach. So we rehearse it before we take it. It's not random. We rehearse it. We practice it. Our school gives us enough time so that we can do it amongst our group of teachers. And when we rehearse it, we actually receive feedback, work on them, and then take it up into the classes.
Thank you so much. We will just go to the next part, and that is going to be by Yukti Saumya. This is her paper where she's going to be giving a little, peekaboo about this paper and what has been her analysis and recommendations, which is going to be on campus violence, the MeToo movements, and the possibilities of restorative justice. Yukti Saumya, over to you.
Thank you. Hi. Can you hear me? Okay. So I'm Yukti. I'm a restorative justice practitioner and the co-founder of the Center for Restoration, which works on campus gender violence using restorative approaches and trauma-informed approaches. So my presentation is focusing on campus gender violence, the MeToo movement, and the possibilities of using restorative justice in this context. I'd used the words possibilities when I began, but the more I've thought about it, I think it's more about the need for it. Because, and what I'm going to start by highlighting is that this is an area where there is a massive gap in terms of both the research and the interventions. So how can I change the slides? Yeah, that would. Yes, okay. So to start with, campus gender violence is recognized as a specific typology of violence in a lot of countries, where, especially in the global north, where looking at campus gender violence specifically also allows them to acknowledge the specific factors that are elements of campus culture that determine the nature and the scale and the frequency and the interventions that need to be designed for it. So this is, in contrast, not the case in India, where there's not a lot of institutional impetus to identify and understand and redress it as a specific form of gender violence. So whenever there has been any data collection, it has been very sporadic. Generally, it's come up in response to a severe or kind of, a case that people know about, and most importantly, it has generally been student-led. So students themselves have been collecting data in their universities when they have been collecting it. To the best of my knowledge, these are the surveys that do exist. There are surveys from 1996, that was before the POSH law was implemented in universities, which looked at the kind of gender violence specifically women students were experiencing. Then there's a massive gap. We have one survey from the Ashoka University that was a gender neutral survey and also looking at the nature and the scale and also the perception of gender violence, sexual violence specifically. And after that, we have replicated, the Center for Restoration has conducted some research in Delhi universities, in some of the colleges, looking at both the perceptions and experiences of campus gender violence, but also the redressal mechanisms that exist for it. Now, these surveys and this particular data collection is something that's being replicated now by the students in some of the states. But really, I mean, these standalone surveys leave a lot of gaps in the information that we actually need. To start with, all of these are different kinds of universities. They all have different kinds of factors. The DU surveys from very early on, they arrived at the conclusion that street harassment was a problem that over 95% of the women students were experiencing. But when we're looking at residential colleges, we're experiencing very different, we're seeing very different kinds of gender violence come up. Intimate partner violence being something that has kind of prevalently come up. So that's one gap where we don't know the influence of specific elements of campus violence. But then secondly, there's also the lack of institutional impetus, as I said. There's sometimes a huge resistance and a lot of fear that institutions have about, when this kind of information is used. And oftentimes this is very much repressed with the university, also within the redressal mechanisms. So before I kind of explain that, I'll talk a little bit about the redressal mechanism itself. The only formalized redressal mechanism against campus gender violence comes from the Sexual Harassment of Women at the Workplace Act. Now, this is an act that was created for women at the workplace, and with the UGC guidelines, it's been somewhat contextualized to campuses, but not really, because there is a vast amount of difference between the population that's working at a workplace and the students that are at a university, and what the kind of needs that they have are. Also, what the kind of justice needs that they have, the kind of relationship that they have with the people that have caused harm, the relationship that the student community has, within itself. None of this is really something that this act can account for. And there is a larger history of students' mistrust towards these ICCs, because the ICCs in several colleges replaced actually student-led democratic gender justice initiatives, where there was more scope for restoration. There was at least more scope for conversation within the student communities. Institutions, because they're ill-equipped to understand and handle this, are also often reacting in very paternalistic and patriarchal ways, where if there is a case that comes up, they might increase the kind of curfews that they have on the women's hostel, they might enforce a stricter dress code and do things like that. Another problem is just with some of the colleges that I've worked at, there seems to be a widespread lack of awareness about this redressal mechanism whatsoever, with around 60% of the students that have kind of responded to our survey saying that they had no idea that such a redressal mechanism exists. There's a larger pattern of neglect towards student well-being, which is also kind of demonstrable by the fact that India in general has a very high rate of student suicides, with nearly, this is very sad to say, but nearly one suicide every 40 seconds. And every college that I have worked with the students of have a story to tell. Like, they have a personal story to tell, and it's really disconcerting. The POSH law has immense potential given its emphasis on making the administration responsible for a safe campus environment. But students seem to be overwhelmingly rejecting these mechanisms. And many of the students that I've interviewed or students that have directly worked with me have cited, these are just kind of some of the excerpts from what they have talked about in ICCs of various different universities. And these are not the worst ones, because the worst ones are not something that I would want to share. But they cite insensitive handling, they cite a lack of trauma-informed approaches, they cite that the justice outcomes are insufficient, or they're just inappropriate, or they're just not what they really wanted. So to break it down, there are several problems happening here. Firstly, structurally, an ICC is not the correct way to address this issue. It's led by overworked professors that don't really want to be doing this anyway. Secondly, it has a lot of biases and it has a lot of mishandling that's happening with the cases. But also, when we're using this tool of criminal justice in a campus environment, there is no way for the survivor victims to also relent. They have to hold on to the fact that this did happen to me, this person is terrible, this person is a monster. They have no other choice if they really want to go through with the justice process, because that's kind of what that system is enforcing them to do. And on the other hand, if there is a student that has caused harm, there is no scope for them to be able to take accountability. There's either punitive action or there is bureaucratic neglect, but there's nothing in the middle that's actually bringing these communities together. I keep going back to this particular study that was done with Restore in the University of Arizona about, okay, I'm going to skip that because I think I'm running out of time. But the point is that what this has led to is that on campuses where gender violence is particularly prevalent and there are no alternative redressal mechanisms, student communities are witnessing several waves of MeToo movements, or they're witnessing lists, social media posts, or there are just extensive whisper networks. So all the queer students, all the women students, everyone that I talk to, they all know that, okay, we know that this person has done this, and people will reach out otherwise to other students and say that, stay away from this person. And it's kind of like the only mechanism that students who are on a campus where there is so much violence feel that they have in order to have any kind of security. And students overwhelmingly, in general, survivor victims of gender violence, specifically campus gender violence, have they want justice that legitimizes their victims, the fact that they have been victimized, that gives voice to their harm, that empowers them to influence how their case is conducted, that focuses on the offender's behavior and not their own, and that involves them in determining the sanctions. Now, this is not something that the current mechanism is doing. But when we see this in light of why these MeToo movements are happening, it makes a lot of sense. It is something that is giving them control over what the consequences are, what the social consequences are. At the same time, here's what it's not doing. It's not making students feel any safer. It's this, it's creating this deep fracture in these communities with limited direction for students on how they can actually move forward from this. And it's not ensuring that the violence can continue. As for students who have caused harm, it is creating a deep sense of fear, a deep sense of, in order to kind of survive this environment, I have to never admit to what I did. I have to use whatever tool is in my power to not admit to what I did. There's no guidance for where they can go forward from there. And there is a certain pathologization that both the ICC and these movements are creating, where there is a sense that somebody who is causing harm has something that is inherently wrong with them. So there is a deep, deep need for restorative justice on campus and a lot of possibility for what it can do. It can firstly resource and assist university administration in addressing these prevalent harms, and not just gender violence, but all kinds of prevalent harms that exist on campuses, from the mental health issues, the kind of pressure there is in terms of career, other forms of violence and discrimination, like caste-based discrimination. Secondly, it can help student communities overcome the rupture that is being caused by this kind of widespread violence. It can help rebuild trust and safety. And this is the point where after these movements is when a lot of students are contacting the Center for Restoration, because they're like, okay, what now? We have this situation, what do we do now? Where do we go from here? It can, of course, address cases of gender violence in a much more effective, survivor-centric, and actionable way than the ICC is able to right now. And it can affirm students' efforts and contribution towards addressing this harm. Because right now, as we know by the surveys, the students are taking a lot of the onus of bringing this change. So yes, that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Yukti. I think that was a very comprehensive presentation that you did, and specifically when she was looking at this approach of restorative approach for something like a gender violence or a sexual harassment at workplace or a sexual harassment on campus. Yukti, I have this one question for you before we move on to the next presenter. Considering that sexual violence, I mean any kind of sexual violence, whether it is at workplace or at the campus, it has, it springs from the power dynamics. So when we are looking at restorative justice, have you also in your paper kind of done a little bit of research of how we could implement this restorative approach for something like this? And have you at any point of time done a comparative approach?
So I have seen a lot of cases. In fact, with universities, sometimes between the students, there will be a lot of disparity themselves. So even if we're not talking about harm between, say, an administration member and a student, and we're just talking student to student, there is often a power disparity. And what you highlighted was one of my very early concerns also when I went into this. But I've seen that when we're working with the ICC, or we're working with a system in which one party just has to completely negate the fact that they did anything in order to kind of preserve their future or preserve their image, that is when they're actually utilizing the power imbalance to be able to use it in whatever way possible. I've also not cited a lot of the examples that I mentioned with ICCs themselves sometimes with the members that constitute it are they come with their own biases. Sometimes they come with their own caste biases. They come with their own gender biases. When they are looking at cases that have these kind of dynamics in them, it does reflect in the outcomes. It very often reflects in the process as well. So from that perspective, I think when somebody is asked that, well, you have harmed somebody, but we're giving you the opportunity to repair it. We're giving you a path out of this. There is a big incentive to not go and utilize those power imbalances and act accordingly.
Okay, this was an extremely interesting perspective. We move to the next presenter, and we have Gouri S. Nair with us. Gouri, are you also going to be doing PowerPoint for us? Gouri, over to you. So Gauri's presentation is going to be on restorative justice versus retribution, and she's giving us a comparative policy analysis.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Gouri. I'm a research scholar in criminology from Karunya Institute, and my co-author is Dr. Beulah, Shekhar. So my presentation today is a comparative policy analysis of conflict management in Indian higher education institutions, and I'm trying to examine the the philosophical divide between the retributive status or the punitive status quo and the potential of a retributive justice as a viable, forward-looking alternative. So why does this topic matter? So it is inevitable to avoid any sorts of conflicts in the universities. It can be simple student disagreements to harassments. It can be of any grave intensity. So the current institutional response across most Indian higher education institutions, they rely on punitive discipline, which is suspension or expulsion or exclusion-based. Those are what they rely on, most of it. So while punishment act as a deterrent, but it often fails to understand it in a deeper level. It rarely promotes accountability or emotional learning or true repair. So this gap is what motivated my research. The problem statements are one, like how the dominant model, which is the punitive, it conceptualizes conflict as a rule violation. It talks about a top-down punishment approach, and there is a deep-seated bias towards the punishments or sanctions. And so this leaves no room for structured restorative justice mechanisms like dialogue or reflection or voluntary accountability. So we are essentially disciplining students for the problem, but we are not engaging them with the problem. And this punitive exclusion-based mindset undermines the university's mission to foster community and ethical behavior, weakening accountability in the long run. So yes, these are my research objectives. One is to compare punitive and restorative paradigms of justice, to analyze Indian higher education policies. Especially I looked at anti-ragging by UGC, then to identify the gaps between both the between both the current systems, and then to propose a policy framework. Okay, so the methodology I used was a qualitative document analysis, and so the document was divided into two groups. One is the punitive paradigm, which had UGC anti-ragging regulations and 5 code of conducts of different higher education institutions. And then the restorative paradigm, which was built using international RJ best practice frameworks. And then I systematically broke down the policy text to codes for concepts like sanction, control, and exclusion for the punitive versus repair, dialogue, and accountability for the restorative. And this approach helped me to, quantify the philosophical gap given to each paradigm. Yeah. Okay, so the punitive paradigm, it was deterrence based. Basically, who broke the rule and what are their sanctions? This is what was mostly focused on in the punitive paradigm. And the goals were deterrence and control. It treated the students as a violator and who has to be excluded. This is what was done under punitive paradigm. And then under restorative paradigm, it is a forward-looking approach, yes. Under this, we looked who was harmed and what is needed to repair the harm, and voluntary accountability by the ones who caused the harm, and the goals were mainly dialogue, repair, and reintegration. These were the main goals. And it also treats the student as a community member capable of accountability. This was what identified. Yes, this is the analysis. And here, the language related to sanction, deterrence, and control under punitive framework dominates the policy at 85%, and languages related to dialogue, repair, and voluntarily accountability, which is under the restorative framework, makes a mere 15%. Okay, so I've included 3 case studies and how a punitive and restorative response would happen. So if it's a student group clash, under punitive, the first approach towards it would be suspension or strong warnings for both the groups. Like it suppresses the conflict, but the hostility and the root cause remain. But under restorative response, it will have a facilitated dialogue circle. The process brings those harmed and those who caused harm together to articulate the impact and clarify the misunderstanding. Yes, so this resulted genuine conflict resolution and not just mere suppression. And second is a plagiarism incident. So here, a final year student plagiarizes thesis due to some academic pressure. Yeah. And here the punitive response will be, of course, to fail the student, maybe a suspension. These can be the punitive response. And for a restorative response, it would include a conference with the student, the supervisor, and the academic committee. And the student will reflect on the harm that they have caused and how it would affect their future. And the outcome of this would be repair. And the trust will also be repaired with proper mentorship and all. Yeah. Okay. So this is from a case study of University of Colorado, Boulder. So there, so it is not just in theory. This model is actually practiced in University of Colorado, Boulder. They use RJ for incidents ranging from dormitory vandalism to relationship disputes. They structure a process where students create a restitution plans. And the outcomes of this were very compelling for the high satisfaction from those who were harmed, and lower rates of recidivism, that is reoffending, and then and a genuine long-term cultural change. This was the outcome of this that is happening in University of Colorado, where they practice restorative justice. And yes. Okay. now the proposed policy framework to integrate RJ as a first tier response to institutional codes of conduct, and then to establish RJ cells that have trained facilitators and ones who know how to manage cases, basically trained facilitators or somebody who's a restorative justice practitioner, and then mandatory restorative justice training for all faculty and administrative staffs, and then student modules to basically restorative citizenship modules for final year students to prepare them for ethical conduct. So basically when they're out of the college, this is a very mandatory thing for them to have a restorative citizenship modules, which is actually practiced in international frameworks, not in India. So yeah, that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gouri. Gouri, I have this one question for you before we open up the house for questions from the presenters. Have you been, in the course of your research, been able to find what has been the demonstrated benefits of restorative justice? There was one specific point which was very interesting, where you said it was not theoretical, but it can also apply to scales. Has there been any university, apart from the University of Colorado, who have taken up this restorative justice and have been able to show good impacts?
Actually, a lot of universities in the international arena uses RJ. And in India, a lot of colleges offer restorative justice courses, but they do not practice it. So that's the thing. I just use that case study because it's very famous, that's why. And to speak about in justice system in Canada, our restorative justice is part of their juvenile justice system. So, and the reoffending rates are very low. So it is actually a practical solution, but there is this gap. Yeah.
Okay. So can we go open house now? Can we just, after a big round of applause to all the presenters who did it so beautifully and comprehensively. Like I was just mentioning in the beginning, I think this is one of a kind of a panel because we have practitioners here and we have this two little panelists here who just kind of lighted up and gave us this, you just walked us through what you do. So now we're going to open the house for discussions, your questions and your reflections. I think this opens up the Q&A.
Thank you. So I just have a question for both of you, and either or both of you could answer. It was great knowing that you really loved the restorative circles that are happening in school. But if you could recollect one circle that had a deep impact on you, or you really are very fond of, what circle would that be? And why would you say that?
Okay, I would like to take this question.
Sure.
Yes, there has been multiple circles which I felt was really, productive. Two topics that I felt were most, connectable. One was bullying. So whichever topic you take, whichever topic that we've chosen you take, it's all somehow connected to bullying, and bullying has become one of the most discussed topics during restorative circles. And I would also like to share this incident from last year concerning one of my classmates. So this person was soft-spoken and introverted, but really nice. We unintentionally made them feel left out, and it was very unintentional. Though I realized shortly after, I could not bring myself to involve them due to our differences. Once they finally decided to open up and talk to our class teacher, who addressed the problem in one of the restorative circles, I felt really guilty, and the guilt followed up to the date. And yeah, such instances followed, and I've even conducted a circle based on inclusivity. Yeah.
Would you like to briefly share?
It deserves a huge round of applause. Excellent.
So is it okay if she could briefly also share about that little circle that you've done on inclusivity?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, as I said, such instances followed, and I was greatly disturbed to see how people changed themselves or acted differently in order to fit in. I approached my class teacher, which happens to be Ria ma'am, and we together came up with the STEM questions. When I finally conducted the circle, we discussed about biases, judgment, and peer pressure, and how this led to misunderstandings and unintentional actions. It taught me a great deal. I learned to respond carefully and not react hastily. And I also evolved from hearing to truly listening to people. This made me more empathetic. Now I'm more comfortable with open discussions and prefer this approach to problem solving.
Thank you. So this question is for Akshita, Lakshman, and Mishriya also. You were just talking about bias and judgment, and so I also work with an organization that works with children, and we see that children of your age and sometimes even younger, much younger, they start developing these ideas of what boys should be like and what girls should be like. And I was wondering if if that has come up in your circles and how you have addressed that. Yeah,
Yeah, this is a very relatable topic actually. It's like I said, there are children who come from different backgrounds, and if a child comes one random day and he comes and says, he or she, okay, mothers are supposed to cook, and that's what they're supposed to do. We really can't blame them because they have grown up seeing that, right? So I feel that these kind of circles give them the exposure to understand that there is another side of the world. And when they see more examples of children, I mean, people doing non-stereotypical roles, then I think that gives them the opportunity to understand that there is a world beyond their houses or beyond their communities. And that's what circles do, right? It helps us to build a better community. So we have had circles. I would not say that the discussion ended there. We have been following up and we have had repetitive circles. But I would also say that there is certain amount of change, a shift. It's a very gradual shift, but I do see that happening somewhere. And I'm hopeful.
that's wonderful. Wonderful to you. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much. My question is more linked to something that was on your slide, Ms. Gauri, but any of you please feel free to answer. In one of the case studies that you showed us, I think the first one, there was this thing about a group clash, right, between the punitive approach as well as the restorative approach. And I was wondering, when two such extremes are coming together, there's also an aspect of what you are used to or what you have seen the most around you, right? So in those kind of situations, have you seen the conflict coming up between such opposing views? And in the context of restorative justice, how do we deal with that kind of an issue where children who are used to different kinds of approaches are, or how do we work with them, right, to bring them on the side of restorative justice? Does that make sense?
I have not worked a restorative circle, so I don't think I'm qualified enough to comment on it. I think she can, or I think they can answer.
Anyone? Yeah.
Yes, I don't do restorative justice with children, so I will leave that to you.
Is it okay if you rephrase the question in a way they can understand?
Sure. So let's say you were to meet children who do not have such circles, right? And they are used to a different kind of approach in their schools already. And knowing that difference, how would you, let's say, explain to them the benefits of how you have done it in your school? convince them maybe, you know?
I think the best way would be actually, letting them try it out. Of course, it's not going to happen overnight. It takes time. And when we actually start opening up to them, when we do it and we model doing it, I think they'll gradually start to understand the benefits and trust the process more, as I said.
So this can actually happen to people that joined the school newly in these 2 years that we've had Restorative Circles. It also happened to us when we first got into this. So I can also relate myself. So when we got in, or when a new student comes in and sees this Restorative Circle, they'll think that it'll be really different for them because they've never seen this in their other schools before. So you can't really explain to them how it works, but like you could just tell them the base rules and let them just trust the process. So as Akshita said, it won't happen overnight. It will take time. In the beginning, they will think that the questions are a bit too personal, as I already said, and they will be hesitant. Like it's really unrealistic to say that someone would overnight just come in, see something new, and then immediately adapt to it. Humans cannot do that. So I would say that over a few months or so, if they're a quick learner, they could take part in the circles. But it is natural that there are still some people who, till now, still are quite hesitant in answering the questions, as they still feel it's too personal. But just like us, their time will also come. They will also understand how it works.
I think wasn't this just cuteness overload and that jnana that elevated thinking that both of you have been giving right from the beginning of whatever that you have, started. I just have one additional question. I don't know if this came to any one of your minds too. Just like the way this skepticism is there with the students, or those of the students who have not been part of this circles. Riya, this question is more to you. Parents also come with their own, their either mindset or their block, isn't it? Now say for example, their child has been a victim of bullying, and if we were to say that we are going to have a RJ approach to that, how do you think you would be able to convince a parent and to deal with situations like this? Because parents are also a very important stakeholders in school.
Yeah, I remember we had this discussion a few days back, and I was talking to my father. So my father, the kind of things that we do in school in terms of RJ, I kind of try to do the same thing at home with my son, and my father was not appreciative. He was like, "How can you be so lenient?" and all that. So it's the same thing when we look at parents. They come from another upbringing altogether. Not everybody are aligned to the values. So what we have been doing in our school is that we have started with a system called roundtable meetings with the parents. So the parents sit with the management just as we are doing right now in a circle, and there's a center, there are the values, the ground rules are stated, there is a talking piece. So we model the behavior, and the parents kind of get a first-hand experience of how circles work. Yes, and then there are certain parents who are very much aligned to the school, the way the school culture, and then there are parents who are not. So whenever we have meetings like that, we can't really overrule the fact that we have people from both the sides of the lines, right? So, and it takes time. What we have been doing is the fact that we have been explaining to the parents that restoration is a hard task. It's not an overnight thing. If I punish someone, that is really, really, it's a quick process. You could see the result being met, but is it long-lasting? It's not, right? So if you want something that has to be long-lasting, you have to give it the time that it needs. So as of now, we have been talking in the same language to the parents, and I hope that they slowly fall into the lines.
True, true.
Just a simple question, one. So congratulations to all of you who are doing this lovely work. It's lovely meeting both of you and the teachers involved in this process. Just wanted to understand that you start this in class 6th, and does it continue your school up to class 12th? And like you said, twice a week this process is. So you think, I mean, just to understand that the whole, I mean, at least 7 classes are doing it on a bi-weekly basis. That must be like really changing the ambience in the school in a way, if it is to that extent being practiced.
Yeah, so see, we have started with, like I said, we had always been inclined to circles. But the proper restorative circles with proper STEM questions is something that we have started around 2 years from now with proper guidance from Enfold. And this is happening all across middle school and high school, twice a week, every week. So I would not be able to tell you exactly because I don't have proper data or any particular matrix regarding that. But what I can subjectively tell is, over the time, there has been observations which tell us that there are instances, tensions which have de-escalated because some child is heard and some child has felt valued. I have seen random empathy blossomed between different parties who might have a really big difference of opinions. Apologies are not forced. They are really genuine because when we have a clear understanding of how our actions impact the others, I've seen children genuinely mean when they say, I'm sorry, and I will try not to repeat it again. So these are certain things that I have seen.
Good afternoon. My name is Sharanya. I'm representing the Coalition for Good Schools. I want to first appreciate Akshita and Lakshman for talking about the skepticism and the relationship building that precedes any kind of conflict resolution through restorative practices. Considering that relationship building and community building forms the foundation of this methodology, I want to ask Gouri and Yukti, if you've seen that in the college campuses, if there's space for this kind of, space and time for the kind of relationship building or community building before you can address, say, ragging or plagiarism or gender-based violence on campuses?
I think there is the need for it and there is the ask for it. And it's not there. So it's kind of, I've been reflecting on your question as well, you know, in terms of the fact that even by the time students come to college, the environments that they've grown up in, the way that they've grown up seeing punition, what their ideas of punishment and harm and accountability are, it's one would think that it's more aligned towards, you know, I want the person that has caused me harm to be punished. And sometimes it is. But the thing about restorative justice, especially when we are using it in context of grave harm, is that it's based on people's very real needs. It's not that, you know, it's a good tool when you're just kind of integrating it into a school and children are growing up with it. Then it's a good tool because they're growing up with the ability to voice those needs and to be able to kind of understand, you know, as you said, the impact that people's actions, like the impact of their actions on other people, be able to take genuine accountability for it. But when you grow up without that framework, that need doesn't really go away, especially when you actually encounter instances of harm. It's not that I knew what restorative justice was before I got into it. And I also got into it because of my experiences of harm and my experiences of violence. So I can tell you what's absent and what that need is. That community, it feels fractured. People feel that rupture. People feel that this is not what they want their relationship with the campus to be like. This is not what they want their relationship with the other students to be like. They feel that, okay, you know, maybe it's nice if there's some punition, perhaps. Maybe they feel that way sometimes, but it's not enough. It's not actually meeting a need. If you suspend somebody because they have harmed me, that doesn't really do anything about the fact that my needs about that harm have not been met. You know, I don't have anywhere to kind of go from here. How do I move forward? How do I integrate this? So when you have that need, you automatically have these communities asking for something, and sometimes they don't know what they're asking for because they don't know that this is an option. So it's just that this is what we have is not enough. We are not okay. And our students are not doing okay. Our students are not doing okay at all. So that's my answer to that.
Okay, I want to share an incident that happened in my life. When I was in 6th standard, I was 12 years old. So some of my classmates, I still don't know who made that. They made a fake Facebook profile and they used my photo and they morphed so many things. I still don't know what was in that. My parents have still not shared about that. And then the whole school started to exclude me from everything. I was cornered. Even though I didn't know how Facebook worked, I didn't know anything. And these people behind this account, the ones who created my account, they used to post links and chat with these students' mothers and fathers, and all sorts of nasty things they did. And then somehow I got the courage to say to my parents that, see, I am facing this thing and please do something about this. And they went to the school, they approached, and immediately they blamed me. I was only in 6th standard, and they said that she might have made it. She would be the person who is behind this. So immediately, that's the punitive thing that they did. Like in punitive, it's never victim centric. It's always how to punish the offender or how to blame the victim. That's usually what happens in retribution. So till date, I don't know who made the account. Still, that harm that was caused is not repaired. But my parents filed a case. The account was removed, and they know who did this. But I still don't know. I still don't have an answer. So that harm has never been repaired, and I still think I have that trauma somewhere. So if only there was Restorative Justice Circle, at that point of time, I wanted to see who made this. I wanted them to say sorry to me. But they didn't. Till date, I don't know. So I didn't know the concept of restorative justice at that time. But if that was present in my school, it would have been, it would have helped me in so many ways. So yeah, I think that answers both the questions somewhat. Yeah, thank you.
So this is just to also respond in some ways what is being put out here. Thanks to so many people here, Swagata, Sujata. So we learned about restorative practices. We have been taking it to schools and also colleges. And so we have introduced it, like I shared in the morning, in the value education books, which we, along with many other NGOs, wrote for the Karnataka government. And it will go into the teacher training as well. What we are also proposing is to include gender equity, sexuality, safety, laws as a mandatory course at any university level. Any student entering a university should have that course. And the approach will be restorative. So that policy brief is ready. We'll be presenting it to UGC, taking it forward, and all of those things. So I really feel it needs to get into the system, into the education system, if you want to see, these, because this is a very nice way to address harm, meet the needs of the victim, have the person who caused the harm practice responsibility, accountability, and those things. So that's what I wanted to share.
Lakshman, this is for you. Sorry to put you on a spot, but I really, I resonated when you said about being skeptical about sharing in circles about personal things, right? And I also sit right there. That's my stand as well. I'm still in that very skeptical space. I want to understand, have you moved from there? And if you have, how did you do it?
So, I would say I have moved from that skeptical phase. So I entered that stage when I first got in, and then I saw the personal questions. I was kind of surprised because back then, before the pandemic, when we had normal circles, the questions weren't this deep. They were generalized. So it was like a big surprise. So I really didn't know how to act to it. But then I saw my class teachers sharing their very personal and sensitive experiences that they would usually never tell us, but in this situation they did. So that gave me the courage to start sharing about my feelings, thoughts, and other personal experiences. And I feel you can do the same too. If like there's other people who can, like for example your friends, if they're sharing their personal experiences, I would say that you too would be able to um, um, take from them and not be skeptical.
Thank you so much for that. I have a question for the teacher. Just wanted to understand when you all do your circles, so who initiates what we will talk about on that day?
So circles are pre-decided in the sense we observe our children, right? So I'm the class teacher of one of the sections of grade 7. So we are in constant state of observing our children, and we know the pulse of the class. We know our children. I believe I know our children. So let's say there has been an instance which has been bothering one of the kids, and probably he or she is able to kind of give us an idea of what he or she must be going through. So maybe that could help us plan the STEM questions to take that into the circle for the upcoming weeks. Also, there are few things that keep popping up. For example, let's say Akshita spoke about bullying, so that's one of the things. And then there are peer pressures, a lot of body shaming at this age group. So we take it up, and it is decided as a whole group when we meet, as teachers, when we meet and we discuss what is the burning issue that you observe, what do you think we should take up. So it's a whole group decision, not an individual decision. And then we plan the STEM questions in such a way that children are comfortable sharing. And you know what, the biggest realization as an adult here is the fact that we are all vulnerable. We were all children. We also had our insecurities. So this being a part of a circle and keeping circles, being a keeper of a circle has helped me be honest and open up to our children. So this is how it goes.
Yeah, I just can't resist one question, and then we will come back to you in just a second. Circles basically are those safe spaces, isn't it, where we dialogue, we speak, and we open up. And then you would also expect those people in the circle to be non-judgmental. So how do you manage that? Would you orient them beforehand? How do you do that? I mean, this is a question that I would like every one of you to please answer.
So in a circle, what initially happens is that the teacher doesn't decide the values. So the values are laid in front of us, and at the start of every circle, we are the ones who choose it. So there's one person who says the values out loud, and we says thumbs up or thumbs down. Thumbs down means you have to explain why you don't want to agree with it. That rarely ever happens. But thumbs ups mean that you agree with the values. So children initially do not like being told. So it is better to just let them choose their own values. If they do that, then they'll automatically follow it themselves. So we have a set of values. Usually what happens is that you see those flower rings. We replace those with values. So one person, usually the class teacher, would read them out and we would all choose it. So that's how it goes in a restorative circle.
Once again, I was also reflecting on that question. Apparently, I think a little later. But I think it's also that we are talking about multiple kinds of circles here. So, because when you asked about time, then I was like, okay, because your school has a lot of circles in the week, so it's a time-consuming process. Whereas the restorative justice that I'm talking about, then when it's specifically looking at instances of violence, can be harm circles. It can also be other forms of restorative justice, like victim-offender dialogues and restorative conferencing. So, yeah, to come back to this, it kind of depends on why the circle is happening. But if we're just talking about a restorative circle that doesn't have a harm aspect to it, or generally just in terms of focusing on the values aspect of it, I think it's, for me personally, how I ask that question would depend upon the people's familiarity to what they are about to do, because I might ask it more on the basis of needs. What do you need? What are your needs from the group and from yourself for you to be present in this circle? And then people write, a phrase or a word, and then there's kind of a conversation about that. So, but yeah, there are kind of multiple things that could be happening.
I'll ask, yeah.
I would also like to mention a teeny tiny thing here. So, like, when you are not judgmental, then others would be so to you too. So, I'd say when you follow it, others follow by example.
Thank you. So just to say, quickly point out that these are values. Unfortunately, one of those streamers has fallen down, and you are also all welcome to write your own values for this space, and on the paper cuttings available outside about what values, what are the values that will make this space a comfortable and safe space for you. So I had a question for Yukti and both, in fact, Dr. Sapna. Yukti, you spoke about how our colleges, students do need a space that they do not have. And we do generally see that there is, in educational institutions, there is a resistance to looking at these sort of new ways of conflict resolution, and of course there is a generational gap, and that, I mean, that, even I'm sure we are all feeling. And so as someone who runs an organization, I also absolutely get that. But would you, would both of you like to reflect on what the reasons are for this resistance towards moving towards more restorative approaches? So say, for example, even if you're having restorative circles, but at the same time, like, 69.9% attendance gets you suspended and not able to give an exam, give your exam, which makes you lose an entire year. That doesn't sit with each other, though that is a system which is punitive in itself. So then even a restorative circle still is like window dressing. So how can we, there is a lot of resistance in educational institutions to move away from these punitive systems overall. How do we address this resistance? It would be my question to you both. Yeah.
The factors for why there is the resistance. I can talk about college that I have been working with right now. So, and this is quite a heavy, bunch of instances and series of events for me to share. So please, prioritize your well-being. It's just sad. There was a college that had the death of a student, and their response to that was to realize that, they have a mental health crisis. And the first reason why there is an institutional resistance to changing the ways that they are approaching things is liability. That was nearly the highest level of consideration given to it. So they started implementing this punitive system wherein if they felt at all that, there was any concern for somebody's mental well-being, they would send that student back to their hometown. immediately. So along with having generally punitive systems for plagiarism, for anything, for any kind of violation, they would also then have this mandatory counseling. And if the counselor thought that, well, maybe you're, a little bit sad, you're going home. So they started sending their students home in massive spots. And it's like, there are other solutions to this, right? But it ends up being stuck as, firstly, it's like when any kind of harm happens on campus, there's a lack of clarity about who is supposed to really take accountability for it. And there's a lot of fear behind that. Maybe personal fear, maybe institutional liability. So that's how it winds up being in this bureaucratic loop, where everybody will say, well, this is, what if you do this first, go here first, do that first. Because there's a lack of clarity about, and a massive amount of fear about who has to kind of deal with it. Then you have the other problem of, it's kind of very unintuitive to a lot of people that have grown up in punitive systems that say something bad happens, and I'm supposed to respond to this with softness. That would just lead to more bad things happening. And then so many bad things will happening, and everybody will know that this is happening in our college. So I think if I was to have a little bit compassion for the administrations, it's fear. A lot of it is fear-driven. And I also think that the solution to that might be to have restorative justice for the administration first. But how do you bring them, how do you convince them to do that when they're like, I have no time? That's an issue. And I'll be very honest, I realize at this current point, I've just sort of stopped working with administrations. Because I'm like, this is an uphill battle and there are more, pressing problems.
Yeah, I'll come from two perspectives. One is the institutional perspective itself and my experience as a lawyer. Now, we have seen, say for example, there are grave instances, grave and very serious sexual offenses. Now, say for example, like the way that it happened recently too, for the past 2-3 years. If you have seen, I think one of the reaction is that where people come out onto the roads to demand justice. And I think the first way that they demand justice is that let the culprits be hanged. This is the kind of the mindset that the people have. So even when we do this, these sentencing policies, there are different theories for the sentencing policy, where we are looking at a retributive way, and then you're looking at, so many different ways of the rehabilitative way. There are so many different ways of this sentencing policy. And so far as the institutionalization of this restorative justice is concerned, maybe right now we have not named it as a restorative justice practice, but I think for smaller things which are relatively less grave in nature, the RJ has been in place. I mean, in the sense of where you have to counsel the students, you have to speak to them and to make them know that, where the root cause is, and therefore it is so. Now, I remember in one of the schools where my teacher, she was telling that there was one instance where she caught a student with certain objectionable, items. They were shocked out of their wits that how could a student like this have something in the pocket? I mean, was it as easy as anything to just, carry it around like this? I mean, while the usual way or the traditional mode would have been to shout at the student, to tell him, and then to bring the parents, they said we had a completely different approach to that. We just sat down the student. We asked, what is the reason that you have something like this? I mean, this is such an adult thing, but how is that it even landed in your pocket? What do you think that you were going to be doing with it, and these kinds of things. So there were a lot of counseling sessions that they happened, and it was only later on, and parallelly they involved the parents in it. So the institution also has its own kind of the traditional mode and the social conditioning that it comes up with. And she was also telling that, it is also about pinning the liability. Now the institutions also will be questioned, because let us try to understand that it is not just the administrators who are not in this RJ mode, but the parents also equally are not
not in the RJ mode. And to convince them and to tell them that here is your child who has been a victim, and then we are going to be dealing with this case where your child is a victim in a dialogue way. I think, that would kind of make them feel very insecure to continue to send the child to this institution. So where there are, lesser grave cases, I think even without labeling them as RJ, we have done these things. But I think for so many other things, we are yet to pick up because, we have to, like this rightly says, we have to start reimagining justice. We have to start to understand that can we even get justice by this way? I think a lot of awareness and a lot of work has to go through this. So, any more questions we are taking?
Hi everyone. Thank you so much. It was a very informative panel. Now, my question comes from my perspective as a fifth-year student in a law college. And we've recently seen multiple instances, and this specifically for you, Yukti. We've seen instances where there have been gender-based violence. There has been an attempt for dialogue, even if it is personal. And in a lot of cases, the person who's committed the harm flat out refuses to either acknowledge that it's harm or blame the victim for it. And in those circumstances, there seems to be quite a strong gendered connotation in the university where sides are picked on the basis of, well, which gender are you in? It becomes very difficult at that point for a victim to then have a forgiving stance. Because even if there has been a private dialogue or there has been an attempt, that attempt is always met with some form of rejection or a gaslighting of their experience. So what I want to understand is how can then restorative justice in that point actually fix the harm, or rather restore the victim to the position they were in, if there is going to be no mechanism for accountability and any form of punitive measure is also taken away?
Thank you. I recently got the same question from somebody who was about to enter a restorative process. Firstly, on forgiveness. This is my belief that the person who has experienced harm or the survivor victim in that situation, there's no obligation to forgiveness. Like, forgiveness is a very far thing. There is no obligation to, be one way or another about that harm from the get-go. It's not like, okay, you want to be part of a restorative justice, I need you to kind of have these, you're not the practitioner. You're the survivor victim. You show up with your experiences and your needs and your feelings, and it's our job to find a way to, have that be held. And I realized that there is a massive difference between private dialogues that happen between two people where one of them has harmed the other person. And I think I've just come to realize the importance of having a practitioner in that case, if that makes sense. Because that person cannot be expected to hold both roles. I think that when somebody has caused harm and when they have a lot of fear and shame and guilt about it, to me, the definition of accountability is to kind of be able to look past those feelings, or work through those feelings actually, not look past them, but work through those feelings, and then put yourself in the shoes of the person that you have harmed to understand what your obligation to them is. You can't work through that shame, fear, and guilt when you are being confronted by it without any preparation. So people who have caused harm also need that preparation, and the person who has been harmed has absolutely no obligation to provide that preparation, if that makes sense. So does that kind of answer the question? I've seen that, I don't think that the way a private conversation goes is a necessary indication of whether that person would be willing to be part of a restorative justice process ultimately or not.
So my follow-up to that is just that, how do you even get someone to the table to have a conversation if they refuse to accept the fact that they have done something to you? Can you actually prove this happened? Were you monitored? Were there witnesses? And that puts the victim in such a position that they simply don't want to go through the whole process of it. The process is the punishment. So in that position, how do you even get someone to sit at the table and have a conversation where on some level just sitting on the table means accepting that they've done something wrong?
Restorative justice processes have a very long or as long as required preparatory stage. It's not that, well, today this happened and tomorrow we're putting you face to face. And that is the entire point. It's that person has to be able to come to the realization of the impact of their actions. And it's not an overnight process. And it's not a process that is, it's not an easy process. Restorative justice is a very courageous thing for someone to agree to. And the courage takes time, you know. And the idea that there's a burden of proof that somebody has to come and sit down and, you know, convince me with like screenshots and whatever they can find that something has happened. What good is that really? And that's a very punitive approach. So it's really like, if I am not suspending you and I am not expelling you and I am not putting you in jail for addressing the impact of your actions, do you maybe have a little bit more incentive to be able to repair this for yourself also and move on? So it's a very long preparatory stage. And I completely understand, you know, where your question is coming from. That's why the facilitator's role is quite important in that situation.
So, Yukti, this is not a question, but a humble submission, is to not give up on working with administration when it comes to restorative justice. I'll tell you why. I feel harm is, it's very difficult to find the origins of harm. And harm has this uncanny characteristic of having this ripple effect.